Well, howdy folks, welcome back to the channel. And sometimes the videos just make themselves. When I woke up this morning, probably the last thing I expected I'd be doing is getting a 7.3 Powerstroke from the dump. But
one man's garbage, another person's good on garbage.
But there's a 7.3 Powerstroke. It came from the dump. So, man, let's get this thing unloaded and we'll do a little autopsy on this thing. I want to try and figure out, what went wrong, why it got pulled out of the truck that it was in, and what parts are still good on this thing, because I know for sure there's good parts on this thing still. So, yeah, let's get to it. Alrighty, there she is hanging off the cherry picker. I'm going to get this thing set up on a tire, but here before I do that, I'm going to drain the oil out of it. That's going to be our first sign. We'll see what comes out of there. Like I said, it was at the dump. That's all I know about it. We can infer a few things based on like the, under valve cover harness connectors. There's two of them. So, and there's a Valley lift pump. So this is an OBS 7.3. Of course, the Y pipe as well is another sign that this is a OBS 7.3 engine. So this came out of an old body style Ford, kind of like my 94.5 there. So yeah, this came out of a 94.5 to 97. And then, of course, we have a little more of a telltale, of course. Oh, if you guys can read that there. Came out of a 97. So this came out of a 97 F250, F350, or F Super Duty. And why it was pulled, I couldn't tell you. That's what I hope to figure out. I want to strip this thing down, pull the cylinder heads off of it, and see if we can't see any cracked pistons or anything. On rough inspection, there's no glaring holes in the engine block. Never mind the hobo hand warmer back there. That's how I've been keeping my hands warm in here. It's not quite cold enough to break out the space heater, and that thing just annoys me because it makes such a racket. So, you just light a little fire in a coffee can, and it works. But back to this thing, of course, it looks super clean. You can still see a ton of paint on the cylinder heads. Like, this thing was not super high mileage when they pulled it, but I guess it was high enough that they were willing to pull it. And this thing got tossed around something fierce. You can see the valve covers are smashed. There's some birch bark stuck on there. So valve covers are pretty smashed up. Those probably aren't reusable. Exhaust manifolds are still good. Turbo's gone, obviously. We have one up pipe. I want to say that's the up pipe I had to cut off of my truck. So I guess I got a set of OBS up pipes if I ever end up needing it. For some reason, they pulled off the 90-degree adapters for the H-pop lines. I wonder if these H-pop lines are any good. Those are something that it's worth tossing a set of, spare H-pop lines in a truck toolbox just in case yours blow. Those will get you back to civilization. One thing that I noticed when I was... Well, first thing I noticed, of course, is I showed up there and was like, where's the lift points? Somebody took a angle grinder to this lift point, cut it off, and they pulled that lift point off. I could never tell you why somebody decided to cut the lift points off of this thing. Like, apparently they just really did not want me taking this engine from the dump. So we've got a chain wrapped around the oil cooler and around this exhaust manifold. It's not exactly proper. It's probably hard on stuff, but I don't know. The price on this thing was right, and I didn't want to leave it there. Symptoms of this thing getting tossed around, it broke the pulley off the water pump, which is fine because the water pump housing's completely cracked. So the water pump's junk, but we've still got the whole front cover and everything aside from that should be good. CPS, ICP, I think the IPR is still down there somewhere, hanging out of the back of the H-pop. Yep, IPR is still down there. The H-pop itself is still down there. I'm pretty sure there are valve covers under the valve covers. I'm pretty sure there are still injectors, which is an absolute score. The H-pop and the injectors alone, I think, is like $500 worth of core charge stuff that, like, you'd get charged if you went to buy a new one. Now I have spare ones. I can send these in instead of, paying the core charge up front, sending my old ones in. So absolute score there alone. Like I said, I'm pretty sure there's still injectors down here. Yeah, I can see you guys can't see, and I don't think I'm going to be able to get the camera at the angle that you can see, but I can see an injector hold down in there. So there should be a full set of 8 injectors in here still, which is just awesome. Now, what I could tell from the dump there was all these leaves packed in here at this angle. This engine laid on its side in like somebody's yard, uncovered for years before they finally took it to the dump and threw it out. And I'm pretty sure, so it was a takeout out of a truck. They left it outside for years, and then they finally got sick of it and threw it out. And, well, my dumb ass went and got this thing. So, yeah, we'll pull the drain plug out of this thing, and then I'm thinking we'll just get her stripped down. I'll do, you know, a video series. I'm going to do an autopsy on this thing, and we'll see if we can't figure out what went wrong with this 7.3 Powerstroke. I've got nothing to lose on this engine. Obviously, it was free. And the only thing that I really wanted was various odds and ends and bits and pieces off of this thing. And the other thing that I wanted was to be able to take one of these apart without, you know, fear of losing my daily driver. So we can strip this engine down to nothing, and it won't cost me anything. And, well, all I'll have in the end is spare parts, which is exactly what I wanted. So, yeah, let's get the drain plug out of the oil pan. We'll see what kind of scunge is in there. Seeming as how this thing clearly sat around for a few years, I think it's going to be pretty grody. Okay, so before I drain the oil out of this thing, I was really curious. I threw a wrench on here. Obviously, the way this thing looks, it's all covered in leaves. It's clearly been sitting outside. It was upside down on its side at the dump. I just threw a wrench on this thing, and we're not getting a full rotation out of her. But, we're getting something. It's not completely seized, which I don't understand how that is. But there might be some redeeming qualities to this Powerstroke. Like, we might be able to save more than I thought off of this thing. So we can get about 1/4 of a turn out of it. It might have gotten a bunch of liquid down in the cylinders. These things hydrolock insanely easily. So, you know, but that is a super good sign, honestly. I almost wonder if this thing had a rod knock or some kind of nonsense going on, and that's why they parked it. But with how scaly this grease and whatnot looks, I would say it's been sitting for quite some time. It had a lot of time to really dry out, which is really interesting. I'm genuinely very curious as to why this thing got taken out. I think it was an automatic truck. Doesn't look like it had a pilot bushing in there, but clearly they took the flywheel or the flex plate or whatever this engine would have had, and they took the adapter. These would have had kind of an adapter plate bolted on here on these dowel pins that would have had the starter mounting on it, and it would have had the actual mounting points to bolt to the transmission. So again, just some interesting stuff about this engine. I really wonder as to what really went wrong here. Alrighty, hopefully there's enough room in this bucket for whatever oil's left in here. This engine got tossed around quite a bit, so I don't think there's a lot of oil left in it, but knowing my luck, it's probably got like 5 whole gallons worth of oil in it. Alright. I see some glitter in there. Yeah, some serious glitter. She probably had a rod knock. That's why she got parked. Oh yeah, and there's some serious glitter on that drain plug. There we go. That's the word. Yeah. So yeah, I'm thinking rod knock, and that's why they parked it. Because that was some serious glitter. I wonder if you throw a magnet on it, if the path of the fluid will change. No. It only changes when you actually touch the fluid, obviously. So it's not that bad, but bad enough. There was some serious gray streaks that came out first things first. They took the oil filter off of this thing and the block heater, which is kind of a weird, you know, pair of things to take off of this thing. So That's interesting. I'm gonna let this thing drain for a little bit. We'll set her down on a tire, and then first things I want to get at are these injectors. I want to see how the injectors look, because if they're good cores, that would be awesome. Alrighty, trying to get at the valve covers here, and I figured we'll take care of the easy pickings first. So I pulled the Y pipe off of here, and first thing I can tell you is this thing was in need of a turbo rebuild, or it had so much blow by, it was just filling the intake full of oil. Like, it's just thick with oil in there. That, of course, is usually your turbo seals are gone, or the or it's got so much blow by it's pushing all the oil through the CDR here into the engine. Another thing I notice is these are cut. So these plenums are junk. Like, they're cut there, they're smashed there. And yeah, so these plenums are pretty much garbage, but leave them on here for now. And then another thing I wanted to look at, they left the fuel filter in here, and I kind of want to see how scungy this fuel bowl looks. Just out of curiosity. Oh, yeah. For reference, that filter there started out as not black. It would have been brown or something, and this is a CarQuest filter, so that's interesting. And then all that gunk down in there. Well, it smells like old ripe diesel, at least. It's not... doesn't exactly just smell like frickin' used motor oil or vegetable oil or something, so that might be a good sign that they weren't running any of that shmoo in there. Just kind of curious. So yeah, next thing's next. We're going to pull the valve covers off. Should just be a bunch of 13 millimeters, I think. These are 10 bolts in these things. I'm going to pull this CDR out of the way. I guess we'll have a look at that and see how bad it looks while we're at it. And then same story on this side. I'm going to get a little bin and start filling it up with old 7.3 parts. I was just looking again, and I just can't believe how much they left on this thing. You know, both fuel lines, H-pop lines. That's your exhaust back pressure sensor. You know, the injector pressure regulator still down there. Your engine oil temperature sensor. The oil pressure sensor. The ICP. Even the camshaft position sensor still down here. I wonder what kind of one that is. Your coolant temp sensor, like, they just left everything on this thing, and I can't believe that somebody could be so wasteful with, you know, such a bountiful resource here. Alrighty, I had to put the hobo hand heater over there on a timeout. It was getting a little rambunctious. But figured I'd give you guys the first look under the valve cover here. Passenger side, obviously, we got AA code injectors. Yeah, I can't believe they left the injectors in here. Like, how wasteful can people be, for real? Looks like pretty good under valve cover harness and everything. If a fellow was trying to troubleshoot junk and figure things out, you know, that's good stuff to have around. These little, two little under valve cover harness in plug-ins on either side go to 2 injectors each. Looks like the, well, I think this side's 2, 4, 6, and 8. So it looks like number 6 got replaced at some point in time. But, man, this thing just kind of looks too good to be true. I can't believe somebody threw this thing out. Another thing that I was thinking is every now and then 7.3s will bend push rods. I've got a full set of 16 now from this engine. So if my truck ever decides to cause trouble, I'll have just extra parts kicking around. Never hurts. I think I'm going to get that valve cover off, and we'll see what those injectors look like, and then we'll pop the injectors out and see what the O-rings look like. I'm kind of curious now. The curiosity's taken over. Alrighty, now we have the driver's side valve cover. Again, one injector replaced. Wonder what's up with that. Or at least the solenoid was replaced. I'll bet it was the whole injector. The more I look at this thing, the more I really just wonder what the story was. Because I was also thinking, and they just cut the harness off. And I remember at the dump there were a couple of the truck side connectors from these, so it looks like they just cut all the wires. I wasn't really thinking of it, but obviously, you know, that connector's cut right off. Oh, that had oil in it, so that ICP is junk. If you guys didn't know, on these 7.3 Powerstrokes, the ICP sensor, it'll blow out kind of an internal seal, and then it'll sort of fill the connector with oil. Like you can see, that's all covered in oil. And when they do that, they'll keep working for a little while, but it's usually a bad sign, and it means it's time to replace that ICP. Just something to look at when you're looking at these things. But yeah, I think they must have been doing something really stupid with this truck. I swear to God, some people. Because, yeah, they just cut all the wires, and they must have just hacked it out of there. Probably doing a Cummins swap or something. The kids really like that kind of nonsense. But, yeah, it looks like we got a full set of injectors that don't look too awful. So I'm going to go ahead and pop these injectors out here. And we'll have a look at those. And then I'll probably call it a night and head home. So pretty much to get these injectors out, if you're doing it, this is obviously a very different story than if you were doing it in the truck or if you were doing it to an engine that you really cared about. Because of course I'm getting all this leaf, litter, and junk down in the valve cover, or the down in the cylinder head, which you would not do if you cared about this engine. But you just pop these connectors out, and then you need to pull off these oil spouts. Those little guys come out, and then it's just these little bolts down here, and then this plate slides down as you lift up on the injector. And when you do that, all the oil and fuel from the cylinder heads goes down into the cylinder. Again, if you cared about it, that's an issue. I don't care. Well, I care about this, but I don't care that much about this particular engine. So, yeah, I'm going to go ahead, pull the little oil spouts off, and then these little lower bolts, and we'll start popping injectors out of this thing. Alrighty. 5mm hex keys, all you need. Start popping those guys off. I've got 3 off of this side, just going to do the last one here. And then hopefully tomorrow I'll be able to bring up a bunch of Ziploc bags and a Sharpie. And I will write down what things are so that I can keep track of them. But for right now, I'll put them in the bin here with all of this stuff. So we've got these good valve cover harnesses, or, you know, in theory, these are still good valve cover harnesses. What's nice is you can get out a multimeter and you can ohm all the connectors and everything on these and make sure they're still good. But, you know, if you got in a tight spot, of course, stuff like that, I wouldn't exactly count on that being, you know, available locally. So that's good to have. The Y pipe's not really worth anything, but again, like, I'm going to throw it out. So yeah, and once those oil spouts are out, you just pop these bolts out and these injectors should be ready to come out. Okie doke. And an 8mm pulled out all of these injector hold downs. No sweat, so we got those guys out of there. And yeah, so now basically all you need to do, you can see how I was sliding that hold down bracket there. So you slide these guys up so they slide over these bolts, and then you can get a pry bar or a screwdriver. The irony of this whole endeavor here, getting this 7.3 from the dump, is I literally just, like, less than a week ago, did injectors on my truck, sent my old injectors back as cores, and now I have more injector cores. And kind of the sad thing is my injectors were still pretty decent. Thing was, I just wanted more power out of them. I would have loved to have held on to them, just knowing that they were still pretty decent if I had a truck that, you know, I could have used them for other purposes. But I'll have these injectors kicking around, just more injector cores. So let's see if I can do this one-handed with one of these. So like I said, you slide that guy up, and then you should just be able to. And like I said, the thing is, usually you have to use a pry bar. When I did my truck, I was able to get most of them just with that screwdriver, but we do have, you know, more force available. Let's see if I can manage this operation. There we go. And then that guy should come up. It budged a little bit. I'm going to try and pop that guy out a little better. Alrighty, as soon as I had 2 hands available, I just went down the driver's side here in like 10 seconds and popped all these guys loose. And that's all it is. Look at that Milky Way nonsense in there. I wonder if that injector cup was cracked. Just Some interesting things, like, makes you wonder, right? The fuel side, I'm pretty sure that's the fuel side. You can't quite see what I'm pointing at, but that guy, the rusty part, I'm pretty sure is the fuel side, and that's looking pretty crunchy. So I must have gotten some moisture in the fuel. These new injectors are looking pretty spiff yet. Huh. And you can hear all that bubbling. That's all your oil and all your fuel going down into the cylinders. Pretty common on these things. Yeah, interesting. I'm going to clear some space and we'll set these down. This cylinder, if that'll focus, looks like it's got some rust down in it. You can just see the tip of the injectors all covered in rust and goo. So yeah, same thing on this side. I got all the hold down bolts, and just pick up the little hold down plate there, put the pry bar under that. Make sure you don't catch that hold down plate on the bolt there. But then what's kind of weird about these is this upper bolt stays put. But you just flip that up there and then put your pry bar under it. These are really interesting how easy they are. Alrighty, this side's all popped free. The new injector, these guys on both sides, so number 246 and number 3, both of those popped out the easiest. No surprises, they're clearly new replacement injectors. Somebody had some interesting times and had to replace these guys at some point. And every other injector has rust on the fuel side. So I wonder what the story is here. If this truck sat for a long time, they replaced 2 injectors that were throwing codes, or... Because yeah, every stock injector here, all these factory AA code injectors have rust on the fuel right there where the fuel goes in. So it's oil, fuel, and then it's sealed from there to there, and that goes down into the cup. And the cup's in the cylinder head, and the cup is what holds the coolant back. But yeah, interesting. So we got a bunch of injector cores here. I would not, under any means, put these in a truck and try and run them. You might be successful with that, but just knowing, I mean, they came from the dump. I'd order new injectors and send these injectors back as cores. These 2 new ones might be pretty decent. It'd be hard to figure out who rebuilt them, you know, just based on what I know. But anyhow, pretty interesting. So we got 8 core injectors. Like I said, it's a big shame I already sent mine back for my truck, or else I'd have 8 good injectors that, you know, I know came out of running 7.3. You know, I'd love to have those handy, but just having injector cores handy is good enough for me, honestly. So yeah, I'll be back tomorrow, and we'll get all the rockers off of this thing, all the push rods out. We'll get all the accessory brackets off of here, and hopefully we'll get the cylinder heads off. I'm curious to see what's going on down in the pistons there. If maybe it's got a cracked piston. Given the metal that came out of the oil pan, I think it developed a rod knock, and that's why this thing got retired. Alrighty, you guys are lucky. I found my tripod here, so you guys kind of get to hang out while we take some more parts off of this thing. Next thing's next. I'm going to pull off the EBP tube here. I already took the alternator bracket off, nothing too fancy there, a bunch of 13mm bolts. So this is EBP tube, or exhaust back pressure tube. Literally goes from the front of the exhaust manifold up to the EBP sensor here. This is kind of what, in part, opens and closes the EBPV valve that goes on the side of the turbo back there. Obviously, the turbo's gone off of this engine. The one thing they kept, the only valuable part they kept off of this engine, honestly, I don't think they could have taken less than just the turbo off this thing. Okay. We'll get this guy popped off of here. These EBP tubes are known to get plugged up with soot and whatnot. So obviously it's an old diesel engine, so kind of fills things up with soot. But when these tubes get plugged up with soot, they can cause the trucks to run funny. So if you have one, it's probably a good idea to pull this tube off and clean it if you haven't. These are actually easy to do in the truck. That one's pretty clean actually, so yeah, spare exhaust back pressure tube. Throw that in the tub there. Alrighty. So I just pulled apart the rocker assemblies on the other side, but I thought I'd take a second here and show you guys this side. I got my little tub down here. I'm going to throw all these in. It's kind of weird. This engine is a 97. My truck is a 94, and my truck has the original engine in it. And the bolts for the rocker stands on my truck are 12 point, and these are 6 point. So I don't know why the design changed, but they're like an 8, yeah, they're an 8mm bolt. And we just pull these guys off. These are kind of a wild design. Not sure if I'm holding that. There we go, for the camera. But it's got a little spring clip in there that clamps and holds this guy in place, and then it literally, the spring pressure holds that the actual rocker itself up, and it pivots on a little ball bearing in there, which is an absolutely wild design. I mean, these are well known for their reliability, these 7.3 Powerstrokes are, so it's clearly a functional design. Just kind of wild when you see it in action. Although I suppose a ball bearing all well lubricated would be quite the friction reducer. There wouldn't be a lot of friction there. Oh, there we go. I don't think she was running too good. There's you guys a nice side-by-side comparison. I was wondering if we were going to see one of those. The other side all looked just fine. For once in my life, I turned the camera on and we got a good one. Bent push rod. I'll bet it had a dead cylinder. I'm going to have to go back and look at the footage. If that came out of this cylinder, that was one of the new injectors that was in this thing. I wonder if they put a new injector in that hole trying to alleviate the problem. And, well, the problem did not get alleviated because it was not an injector. That might be part of the reason why this thing got parked. I can understand when you try to fix something and something doesn't get fixed, you would, well, I've gotten pretty irritated with stuff with that kind of thing. Very interesting. We got a bent push rod. This injector was filled up with some milky stuff. Oh, now I can see it. I couldn't see it last night. That injector cup was cracked. That's why it was filled up. I think it was on camera last night when I was pulling these injectors. If not, the very bottom of that injector that would have been in the injector cup itself had some like weird milky looking stuff on it. That was coolant because that injector cup was cracked. The rest of them looked fairly normal-ish. But yeah, I can see a nice crack in that cup. I'll see if I can't get a photo of it here for you guys, but there's the push rods off of this thing. I still got to pull the H-pop lines. I'll probably pull the fuel bowl out of there and the fuel lines and everything, and then we'll be ready to, well, maybe I'll do pull the up pipes off here. I'm figuring it out as I go. Alrighty, for those of you who were probably saying it earlier, yeah, gonna get the fuel bowl out of the way. Pretty neat stuff here. I mean, I've never actually personally looked at one of these out of a truck, so it's kind of neat to have a look at this thing. Kind of a conglomerated mess, to be honest, but you know, it works, I suppose. You can see where they cut off this wire and they nicked that bolt when they were cutting the engine lift point off of this thing. I still can't understand why somebody would cut the lift point off of one of these, but I don't know, some people. This gives us real nice look at this very unhappy looking H-pop. It's very corroded in here. Got, I honestly couldn't tell you what connector that is. Boy. So I think I'm going to leave the lift pump in here. I pulled the fuel lines off of here because those obviously go to the cylinder head, so I wanted those out of the way. But the front fuel lines are off. I just need to get this H-pop line off of here. And then I think we're ready to finally start pulling head bolts. Alrighty, so we just pulled both exhaust manifolds off. This side is looking pretty rank. The front two cylinders are looking pretty rowdy already. Cylinder head's not even off, and well, there's rust down there, that's for sure. But this side, this is the side that I should have been filming me pulling this off because, yeah, she was jam-packed full of ice. There we go. Just got to get a little more violent with it. Those. Ugh. Well, as we expected, nice piston-shaped chunk of ice. That cylinder there is the worst of the bunch, it looks like. Oh, and before I forget to mention it, I found another issue with this engine. Before I pulled the first cylinder head here, I pulled all the glow plugs. They're in this tray over here. I'd treat them nicer if they were anything but auto lights. Pro tip, never, ever, ever put anything but Motorcraft glow plugs in any Ford diesel engine. I probably can assume that this engine had a tough time starting because I'll bet every single one of those glow plugs is bad. And that's part of the reason why they got mad at it. So we got a bent push rod, a cracked cup, crappy glow plugs. This thing was probably an absolute pig to start. Alrighty, let's see what's hiding behind door number 2 here. We'll see if I can manage to pop this thing loose first. There we go. Get all these junk tools out of the way. Hopefully you guys have a pretty good view. Yeah. Guess the dipstick's just going to be in the way for the time being. Find a couple good spots to grab a hold of this thing. Alrighty. Alrighty, folks. The 7.3 from the dump. Let's talk about it. What went wrong? What's my assessment, at least, anyhow? I think opinions are going to differ on, what actually went wrong, unless I ever, managed to find the person who threw this thing out and could actually tell me what went wrong. First and foremost, the rust in that cylinder is just from this thing sitting. Given that rust and how many leaves and spruce needles and everything was on this thing, I'd say it sat outside for, like, I don't know, 3, maybe 4 years. It could have been outside longer than that. It could have been outside a shorter time than that. If you're in a place with a lot of spruce trees and birch trees and whatnot, you'll get quite a bit of leaves and whatnot on it. But that is a lot of leaves to be on this thing, so I'd say it sat outside for a good few years anyhow. Aside from that, we've got a bent push rod, 2 replaced injectors. One of those replaced injectors was on one of the bent push rods, so it makes you wonder if the injector was replaced because of a dead cylinder and instead they should have checked that the push rod was bent. So that's one potential avenue, is that they replaced an injector on this cylinder. The push rod was bent, so when they replaced the injector, the cylinder was still dead. They got pissed off. It happens. Another thing can happen with these engines is that they replaced a ton of sensors. They put in crappy sensors that didn't do the trick. Other wiring issues could relate to that. You know, sensors, they're kind of important on these engines. I wouldn't say this engine was exactly a spring chicken. It had higher mileage on it, but there was still, I don't know if you guys are going to be able to see it, there's just a little bit of cylinder crosshatch in this thing. Every time I rotate this engine over a little bit, it just fills the cylinders back up with oil. Let's see if I can get that rear cylinder down a little bit. There we go. Again, not sure if you guys can see it, but there is a little bit of crosshatch left in there. The ring ridge isn't horrendous on this thing. Like, it's pretty decent, honestly. If this were a dirty old gas engine, I'd say, oh yeah, you could just skate a hone in there and, you know, she'd be pretty mint. Given that this thing's a 7.3 Powerstroke and they're a lot more complicated, I'd probably take a more sophisticated avenue towards fixing this thing up. I don't have any aims to fix this thing up, to be honest with you guys. Obviously, it was at the dump. I couldn't turn it down, so I grabbed it. But yeah, well, and the other thing that could have led to its demise was cheap parts, like I said, bad sensors, and of course those auto light glow plugs. It's just, you just gotta have good glow plugs in these things, and auto lights, if they don't swell up in the cylinder head, they're dead right out of the box. That's just how they are. I've seen it on IDIs. I've personally never seen it on a Powerstroke, thank God, because these things are quite a bit more complicated to get at the glow plugs, and if you put cheap glow plugs in these things and they swell up in the cylinder head, it was a pain in the butt to pull these cylinder heads with the engine out of the truck. I couldn't imagine with them in the truck just because you use cheap glow plugs. So that's one of those things. But yeah, ultimately the big thing I'd say is just flat out neglect. The oil had a lot of glitter in it when I pulled that plug, like kind of a surprising amount, so that would have lent to it. The oil's just midnight pitch black, so I'd say it didn't get enough oil changes. The fuel filter was black, and this thing was running diesel still. It smelled like diesel, not oil, so it's not like they were running it on used motor oil. So it needed a fuel filter, it needed oil changes religiously, it needed decent glow plugs, it needed a straight push rod in this cylinder, you know. Yeah, this poor old gal, she had her good days, and somebody just wasn't willing to make those good days last a little longer. So, well, away she goes. But thank you guys for watching and enjoying this. What I'm going to do now is get this engine cleaned up a little more. I'm going to put some more oil in the cylinders. I'm going to slap the cylinder heads back on temporarily just so the cylinders aren't open to atmosphere as much. The injectors are still out, but I'm going to try, and of course the cylinder heads being on it, they won't be in the shop here, and then I'll get this thing cleaned up a little more, and we'll stick it on a pallet out in the yard. And if I ever need 7.3 parts, well, I'll know where to look first anyhow. So yeah, thank you guys for watching and following along, and this little autopsy of this 7.3 Powerstroke, you know, and yeah, we'll catch you guys on the next one.